Hello, I'm a PS3 and welcome back to this video. So if you don't know, in Minecraft, most items stack all the way up to 64. The reason for this is because it's 2 to the power of 6. It's a little bit of a programming thing that most things are, 2 to the power of something. That's why you get, 32, 64, 128, 256. That's why these numbers are so common, because they're just simple programming numbers that are 2 to the power of something. So anyway, with that said, a lot of items in Minecraft, the vast majority, like 90+% of them, go all the way up to the stack of 64. And a lot of items which previously didn't go to 64, like the spawn eggs, now do, because there's not many reasons not to go up to 64 when you really think about it. Like, maybe you can argue like, oh yeah, but what about space? But then you think like, well, I mean, if you can carry 64 gold blocks, then why can't you carry 64 eggs with you? And in today's video, I want to talk about lots of items which currently still don't stack all the way up to 64, in terms of like they stack to somewhere less than 64, because it's kind of weird that they do exist, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of the logic, and maybe, like how we changed the spawn egg from being 16 to 64, maybe we can change all of these items as well. So hopefully you do all enjoy this video. You can like it if you do like it, because it helps out the channel, and let's know you do enjoy this sort of video. Again, if you want to know, this is actually the world I used for my 5 console exclusive builds. I had to cover it up in dirt. I just like pasted some dirt over here, so that's why it looks a little bit rough right now, but slowly over time it will be covered in grass and it'll look beautiful. But for now, we've just got this big slab of dirt, and we're going to use this to talk about the very first item, which doesn't stack to 64, and you can probably see quite a few of them from the distance because it is banners. So pretty much every color of banner will only stack up to 64. No matter what design you put on there, it can only stack up to 16, sorry. So instead of stacking all the way to 64, it stacks to 1/4 of that number at 16. And this is where every item on this list actually stacks up to, and it's a really weird thing to decide, because it, again, you can argue like maybe for space reasons, like banners are really big, but again, you can hold 64 gold blocks. They're so heavy, they're so giant. The banners aren't actually that big in comparison. They're really thin, as you can see right here, which means that's not really the most valid of arguments. So yeah, as you can see, by the way, we've got a French flag banner and then a Russian flag banner. But yeah, the fact that you can only fit like 16 banners, which isn't even this many, into one slot is really confusing, and it makes you wonder, like, what gameplay value do you get from having them only stack up to 16? Like, is anyone out there being like, you know what, if you could have banners of 64, I don't think I like the game anymore. It wouldn't be challenging enough having to transport my banners in weird stacks. No, I don't think anyone, like, defends the banner size being 16. I think someone came up with the idea one day, like, oh yeah, what if it went to 16, like, the other items, and they're like, I guess there's no good reason not to. But yeah, the banners are the weirdest case of just, like, is there any good reason? I mean, maybe you can argue their size, but like, a bunch of other items will let you do it, and it's just kind of strange that you can stack doors and stuff to 64, which are bigger, thicker, and heavier, but you can't stack banners no matter what the design you have. So yeah, that said, the next item that can only stack up to 16 is it's another really weird one, because it is ender pearls, which is really strange, because you got to bear in mind is IF enders, which are again exactly the same size, similarly in function. They're just magical, like they fly you to the end portal, but they're pretty much the same thing in terms of like the size and stuff like that, but they can stack up to 64. However, ender pearls can only stack to 16, and bear in mind, this was before there was a cooldown on throwing ender pearls, so it's not even like you can argue like, oh yeah, well maybe there's just some magic properties that prevent you from that. No, it's just one of these things where it's like, when they were first added, like maybe for OP reasons, they're like, oh yeah, let's watch out, let's make sure we can't have 64 of them, but since then they've nerfed them so hard, they've made it so that, one, like they throw a little bit weird, two, there's a giant cooldown between them, there's also the fact that obviously, you take 2.5 hearts of damage, plus the fact that you've got a 5% chance of spawning endermites. These, ender pearls have been so nerfed, and in PvP, even, despite that, they're pretty rarely used. Like, they're wonderful, I love using them in Skywars, but most people just don't consider using them, which is really strange, and I don't think the reason they don't consider using them is because they don't stack up to 64. So we've got another weird item that just doesn't go all the way to 64. It just only goes to 16, and again, at first, maybe that was for balance reasons, but is that necessary anymore? Especially when, like I said, the ender pearl IF enders go up to 63 or 64, as well as the blaze powder, which isn't too relevant, but still, it's worth noting the other, both the ingredient and the end result that it can go to 64 with, both go that way, and then the ender pearl itself doesn't. It's strange, doesn't make much sense, and it's another weird case. So the next thing we've got here is signs, which can only go up to 16 as well. Again, exactly why 16, I'm not sure, because the funny thing about signs is they used to only stack up to 1. You had to have individual signs in your inventory, and that was like weird and hellish and awful, and then they decided to stack all the way up to 16, which is strange and bizarre because it makes no sense, because again, like, although like, okay, you can see right here, I've got myself some signs, and there's one sign, and then we'll put one on top of it. Like, is there any reason these can only go to 16 instead of 64? 64? There isn't. The only reason is because they were 1 before, but it's like, you know what, maybe we should consider, you know, is items stacking up to 16 adding anything to the game? Is there any value you can get from these 16 stack items? Because bear in mind, like most items in the game, you might think like, what else only goes to, you know, 16? Not many things, which means 90+% of items, they stack all the way up to, you know, 64, and this means even when you go to armor stands or something, which I think used to stack to 16, they go 64. So it means when you pick up any item, you expect it to go all the way to 64, and when you have signs at like 16, you just end up going, oh, they go to 16 instead, so I have to split my, you know, what would have been a stack of 64 across like four separate stacks, which just, it's weird, it's strange, and I don't see the purpose for it. I don't see the purpose for it at all, but maybe that's just me, and that's another weird case of like, why does this only go to 16? Speaking of only going to 16, we've got the buckets here. Again, used to stack to 1, now they stack to 16. Exactly why that is, still never been quite determined, but it's just one of these weird odd things. So yeah, you can actually, once the bucket fills up, it goes to like a full stop, and maybe you can argue that's because like, oh yeah, once the bucket's filled, you can't stack it in other buckets, but why can you only stack 16 buckets together? It's just one of these things. Again, this one, like, maybe it could be OP because you could drain water too fast, but again, it's you know, when you consider the fact that most items stack to 64, I think the fact they should either stack to 1 or to 64, this middle tier of like 16 is like so strange, and no one really ever sees it as a positive thing, and that is buckets right there. I just don't see the point, and I don't get it. So next up we have snowballs, which again, I mean, like, is there any balance issues of having these throw to they're really weird throwing on this version, by the way, but is there any balance issue to being able to throw more than 16 snowballs at a time? Again, they're one of the most pointless items in Minecraft. They have like maybe like 3 or 4 uses. That's to like pretend hurt a mob. It doesn't actually hurt the mob at all. It only makes them feel hurt, or you can use them for the end dragon because you can throw at the end crystals. That is 100% of these things' uses, besides I guess like, you know, custom game modes, but still you can't use these for anything because in default Minecraft they're not used for PvP, which means that snowballs exist is just this weird thing where it's like, why, who decided only 16? Okay, this one, there's no space, there's no size reason, there's no gameplay reason because they basically don't have a gameplay reason to exist. It's just someone decided at one point to put these in a stack of 16 and then everyone else just kind of went with it, which makes no sense, but it doesn't make quite as little sense as the final one here, which is the egg. So eggs are a thing you can throw to get chickens. And again, spawn eggs for chickens go up to stacks of 64, and spawn eggs are presumably bigger. I mean, like, you throw them on the ground and you can see for yourself, they're like, the spawn egg looks a little bit bigger because it's got the patterns on, but let's say they're exactly the same size. Why can a spawn egg go to 64, but a regular egg can't? I mean, again, the only argument you can make then is like, oh yeah, it's not a logical reason, it's not that there's a space reason, it's because eggs would be too OP if they went to 64, but who genuinely thinks that? I can't, you know, if you genuinely think right now that eggs going to 64 would ruin Minecraft, let me know, because I'll give you a clue. Nobody thinks that in the world, and honestly, most people don't even care about the fact they go to 16 because you don't have more than 16 eggs at a time, but if they do have more than 16 eggs, it just makes them a pain to transport. If you want to take, you know, like 1,000 eggs from one part of the world to the other, it takes you 4 times as long because you have to split it up. If you want to throw eggs at the ground because you want to, like, you know, start a baby chicken farm, then, you know, it takes you like 4 times as long, which is just silly that you have to do that, like move from one stack to the next, the next, the next. It doesn't make any sense. It's just one of these bizarre limitations in the game, and yeah, it made me realize, like, that honestly, there's a lot of things in Minecraft that don't stack to 64, and I can't think of a single good reason for any of them. So if you have a good reason for any of these features not stacking to 64, again, maybe ender pearls, they were OP at one point, but they're not anymore. But all the other features, it just seems like, oh yeah, they were trying to decide a number. 64 just didn't seem right for no good reason, so they went to 16 instead. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Like if you liked it, share if you liked it, and let, you know, either let someone at Mojang see, or again, do the liking, sharing thing, because if someone sees this, they'll eventually realize, like, wait a minute, yeah, we do have items to stack 16. What's that all about? And hopefully we can change it just to make the game a little bit more usable and a little bit more consistent, because, you know, when we had 16 stacking spawn eggs and then we went to 64, it didn't really change much, but it did make the game a little bit more, you know, consistent, and consistency is a good thing in my opinion. But maybe that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day, everyone. Goodbye.